I just want to welcome everybody to the GLREA Clean Energy Seminar. My name is John Freeman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. Normally, this would be hosted by Mark Clevey, GLREA board member. Mark is out of town, so he asked me to sit in as a guest host tonight. So I want to welcome everybody. For those people who are not familiar with GLREA, we are a nonprofit organization that was established way back in 1991. So we're in our 31st year, I guess, where our mission is to educate and support the expansion of renewable energy in Michigan. We're a 501c3, so we're supported by our members, and members pay dues. So for those of you that are not members at GLREA, I would certainly encourage you to become a member. And it's really easy to become a member. You just go on the GLREA website at www.glrea.org and look for the membership tab at the top and click on it and scroll down and you'll see a yellow button and you just press it and follow the directions. Tonight's program is very important. And I think it's clear by the turnout is how important this is. And we're going to talk about the most recent proposal by Detroit Edison DTE Energy that they filed on January 21st. I'm going to tee this up by saying that this is absolutely a critical rate case, because not only is DTE asking for another $351 million of a rate increase, almost a yearly increase every year, and the electrical rates in Michigan are one of the highest, if not the highest, in the upper Midwest, but also they have targeted solar energy to go after. They want to reduce the amount of money for the extra electricity put back on the grid from solar owners, and then they want to impose new fees that were called demand charges. John Richter, who is a GLREA board member, he is our resident expert on utility cases. John GLREA routinely intervenes in these rate cases in front of the Michigan Public Service Commission. And John is one of our two expert witnesses that writes testimony and looks at all the documents that DTE puts forth and makes arguments, crafts arguments on how they're ridiculous. The other gentleman that's really active in doing this has joined us tonight is Rob Rafson, who is with Chart House Energy. And I'm really glad that Rob is here. And I also want to recognize Don Keski, who's also on here. He's our attorney that helps us with these rate cases. So the way it's going to work is that John's going to talk for about 25 minutes or so, and then we're going to open it up for questions for everybody. John does have a PowerPoint presentation he's going to work through, and I think it's going to be very informative. And the question and answer period is very informal. Feel free to ask any question. There's no silly questions that you can ask, because we all can learn from each other. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John. Thank you, John.
All right, let me see if I can get the screen share to work the way I want here. There we go. So my name is John Richter. I'm the Senior Policy Analyst for the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. I got my email address on here and the last slide as well, if you're interested in a copy of the presentation or have questions. So the agenda tonight is really simple. I'm going to talk very briefly about the history of customer-owned solar in Michigan and how it's been treated by the utilities. And then I'm going to go right into DTE's latest proposal, which involves two different substantial changes to the way that they treat solar customers. The first one is they're going to reduce the outflow rate, and I'll explain what that is. And the other is that they are creating a whole new tariff with some demand charges. I'll explain what that means, that they would force solar customers onto. They'd be optional for other customers, but mandatory for solar customers. So we kind of got started here in Michigan in 2008 when the legislature passed a law that gave us net metering. We were a little late to the table. Most other states had already passed net metering earlier, but we got it in 2008. And part of that, what net metering meant was that if you have a generation system on your home or your business, and you have excess power that you then flow back into the electric grid, that the utility would give you a credit for that equal to the price that they charge you, right? So whether you're giving them electricity or they're giving you electricity, it's the same price, and they would net those kilowatt hours, right? Subtracting what you gave them from what you bought from them, right? And they put a limit on that of 1% of the utility's peak generation capacity. Now, at the time, that didn't seem like much of a limitation. Solar was still very expensive back then, and that there wasn't a whole lot of it happening. And it just seemed like an idea to kind of see how things went. And then, obviously when we hit that, we'd have to reevaluate things. But we didn't get that far. In 2016, the legislature acted again and replaced net metering. And they said instead, you'll get a credit for that excess power that you put back on the grid, but it will be either the monthly average real-time locational marginal price. Now that's a mouthful. All that really is the wholesale price. That's the price that large utilities like DTE and Consumers Energy, utilities in other states sell power to each other at. And it averages about 3.2 cents per kilowatt hour. The other alternative written into the law was that the credit for your power you put back on the grid, your outflow, would be equal to the power supply component excluding transmission charges of the full retail rate. It sounds a little confusing. It's a little bit of sort of utility jargon there, but I'll show you exactly what that means. The important thing is that in each of the cases for DTE, for Consumers Energy, for UPCO, for Indiana Michigan Power, the MPSC decided to use the power supply excluding transmission. This is a snippet from my electric bill from DTE. So you see the charges are broken out. There are power supply charges and there are delivery charges. So the point of this mechanism is that our credit right now is that the sum of these power supply charges. So you can see I've added this up, and while I'm paying 16.58 cents a kilowatt hour, 9.34 cents of that is power supply. This is what it looks like. If you look at the breakout of the rates that DTE charges, you charge a different rate for the first 17 kilowatt hours a day, and then a little more for additional kilowatt hours. And there's a power supply charge, which is, a little higher beyond the 17 kilowatt hours. And then there's a distribution charge of 6.6 cents that always applies, right? So I add those and the 6.6 and get the total rate. And then this is the outflow credit. So you'll notice this is a little bit less than the power supply, and that's because the power supply includes a transmission component that the MPSC backs out. So that's kind of the current state on the default residential rate, which is the rate that residential customers are put on unless they specifically ask for something else. There's also an optional time of day rate, which gets just a bit more complicated. There's different rates. There's a summer peak and a summer off peak and a winter peak and a winter off peak. And then there's a non-capacity energy charge and the distribution charge, right? And so I add these up and show kind of the total rates here and the outflow credit. So this is the state of things as they are, and it was quite a shock to Michigan solar customers to go from net metering, where we were getting the full retail rate, to this power supply minus transmission computation, which works out to roughly half of the retail rate. Despite that significant setback, the number of customers that have been connecting their renewable energy systems, which is now almost entirely solar. In the early days, there was some wind turbines, home scale wind turbines people put on. But demand has been growing exponentially. And frankly, I don't think the utilities like that. So DTE has a proposal in their current rate case, as John said. It was just filed in January. The case should conclude in October or November. And they have two big changes for solar customers. Now, this is a rate case. There's all kinds of stuff in this. There are probably 100 different issues in this case, right? But I'm focusing on these two that affect solar customers. The first is would reduce that outflow credit to locational marginal price, LMP, which is about 3.2 cents. And there's no grandfather clause. So when we went from net metering to the DG tariff, anyone who was already on net metering got to keep it for 10 years from when they first turned it up. Not 10 years from when the law changed, but 10 years from when they first turned it up. There was a grandfather clause in there. There's no such grandfather clause in this. What DTE is proposing is that once they implement the rate tables for this in, they're saying first quarter of 2024, so there's a little time there, everybody would be changed over to this. So it doesn't matter, you know, how long you've been on it, boom, 2024, they're going to cut the outflow rate. The second thing that they would do is force all new solar residential customers onto a new tariff, something they're just creating in this particular case. And this tariff includes two demand charges. I'll explain those. And it would be available for any other residential customers that wanted it, but it would be mandatory for solar customers. So on the outflow credit, they're saying they would do this in either the first quarter of 2024 or when they hit their DG participation cap, whichever is later. So that goes back to that 1%, right? That only 1% of their peak demand can be installed distributed generation customers. They're going to hit that much sooner than the first quarter of 2024, unless it's increased, which they have a proposal for that in here. Importantly, the outflow credit would then be completely divorced from the retail rate that you're paying for your electricity. As it is right now, every time DTE or consumers goes and raises their rates, they have to recompute the outflow credit to cover the power supply minus transmission. And so the outflow kind of gets a bump as well. It doesn't increase as fast as the rates, but it increases with them. With this proposal, that would cease to be true. And so the outflow rate would always be the wholesale electric price, which, you know, varies from month to month and actually hour to hour, but not all that much. But it doesn't have this trend line. And in fact, wholesale rates have been trending down, not up. Now, I'm a little hopeful about this because in the prior rate case, DTE had proposed the same thing. They had wanted to set the outflow rate at LMP, and the MPSC said, no, we're going to go with power supply less transmission instead. DTE has put forth different arguments in this case than they did in that case. I don't think they're compelling, but you know, anything can happen. The second thing that they want to do is create this whole new rate schedule, which they call a stable bill service level, which is kind of confusing terminology. Like I said, it would be voluntary for all customers except solar customers for whom it would be mandatory. There's a much lower per kilowatt hour rate for your electricity, 5.2 and 4.7 depending on the time of day. But there's two new monthly charges that they've added. Both of these are based on something that's a little difficult to find and compute. It's based on the peak amount of energy that you used in the highest 3 hours in the past 12 months. And you take the average of those 3 peak hours. So given that there are 8,760 hours in a year, right? That's a lot of different hours. You have to find the 3 highest ones, and your monthly charges would be based on that. So here's a table drawn right from their rate schedule about how that would go. So on the left here, you have what they're calling a service level, which is a new term, which is that average of the 3 peak hours. How much electricity did you use in those? And then there's a capacity charge. This is a monthly charge that would appear on your bill based on that service level. So, I mean, how would you figure this out? Well, I did it. I went to dteenergy.com. There's an option on there where you can download into a spreadsheet a file of your last 12 months of usage by hour. And then you got to sort through that and find the 3 highest and average them. So I did that. And so my peak usage was 4.25 kilowatts, which would put me into this more than 4, but less than 5. And so my capacity charge would be $23.41. Now that's just one of the 2 charges that they're adding to the bill. The second one is a delivery charge. So this is supposed to be the cost of transmitting the electricity to you. It uses the same service level table. So I'm still on this 4 kilowatt, more than 4, but less than 5. And that's 20 or okay. I think I actually have an error in my PowerPoint here. So sorry about that. So that one's, yeah, 2340. You know what I did? I copied the same table. So ignore the table up here. It actually comes out to $43.02 for a total of $66.41 a month. That's just a flat charge on the bill. And then your usage is on top of that, but at a much lower rate than the current usage rate. The point here is it's very hard to figure out, very hard to predict, and hard to do anything about. In theory, you could manipulate your usage so your peak hours are lower, but how would you do that? So we are interveners in this case. I will be submitting testimony. We have to take the arguments the DTE has been put forward and explain why they either aren't true or they aren't relevant. So, for example, to say that the DG outflow credit is not unfairly high, it's unfairly low. That right now, solar customers are subsidizing the other customers, not the other way around. And that locational marginal price does not reflect the cost of service. Now that phrase is very important in rate cases. It's the essence of how rates are to be set. And so we have to show why that doesn't reflect cost of service. Secondly, it would be discriminatory and predatory to mandate a new rate schedule for solar customers when it's voluntary for all other customers. This is separating out customers who are trying to do the right thing for the world for special treatment. And they make no bones about the fact that they should pay more. And then third, the demand charges, and based on residential peak use, don't reflect cost of service either. Now, DTE says they do, and we have to explain why we think that's not so. And they're confusing to customers. This is not, demand charges are being used today for industrial customers and larger commercial customers. But to subject the entire residential base to that kind of thing, I think there's going to be a lot of confusion, an awful lot of calls to DTE saying, what is this? But most customers won't sign up for it. Just the solar customers will be automatically put on it. That is all I had. And with that, we can throw it open to questions.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments. This is John Freeman again. It's really clear from this proposal that what the intent is by DTE is to totally undercut the market for solar in Michigan for homeowners and small business. They're a monopoly. They've been in control of energy for 100 some odd years. And I think they view solar as a threat. They don't like free market competition. And so they're trying to be clever by imposing all these additional fees, which essentially makes it uneconomical to install solar because, you know, you're not going to be able to save money by installing solar if you have to pay another 60 or some odd dollars every month as a part of these demand charges. And so we view this as essentially DTE is trying to bluff their way to getting what they want, like they've always done in recent history. And they want to get rid of the solar market, the small scale solar market. And what they always do is they always argue that solar owners are being subsidized by non-solar owners. And John mentioned this, but I want to reemphasize this because it's completely not true. And in fact, the Public Service Commission has testified to the Michigan House Energy Committee saying flatly that solar owners are not being subsidized by non-solar owners, that in fact, they are paying their fair share of the grid. And they've said this directly to legislators a couple of times. And yet DTE continues to tell people that in fact, solar owners are being subsidized. And so we think they're
the term they're actually using is they're shifting costs.
Right. So we feel that they're being completely dishonest as a company, and they're just abusing their privileges of serving people in Michigan. So GLREA is going to work incredibly hard to fight this. And we have set up our initial effort is to send emails to the Michigan Public Service Commission to let them know just how we feel about this proposal. And so if you go on the GLREA website, you'll notice in the upper right, there is a tab called Take Action. By clicking on this Take Action tab, it will take you to software that will make it easy for you to send an email to the Michigan Public Service Commission. It's addressed to Dan Scripps, who's the chairman of the commission. Now, there is a pre-written email in the box, but you are able to add any content you want, or you can rewrite it in your own words, and that's perfectly fine. But I would encourage you to send an email because it's important that the commission understand how the people of Michigan feel about this proposal. And again, I want you to encourage you all to become members who are not members of GLREA, so we have the resources to take on DTE. So why don't we open up for questions now? And I think Dave Curtis has his hand up. Marcia, just raise your hand and I'll call you next. But Dave, you've got the floor. Go ahead, Dave. Dave,
Okay.
are you on?
Yep.
Okay.
My question is, does consumers follow along DTE's path as they introduce these types of things to the Public Service Commission?
I think if this got approved, I think it would be very likely that consumers would propose something similar, especially regarding the outflow rate, but possibly demand charges too. That there's certainly a history of that sort of thing.
I think it's an absolute guarantee they'll do the same thing, because once DTE got their distributed generation tariff, Consumers Energy made it real clear to the Public Service Commission that they wanted the exact same thing that DTE got. So I think it's a given. And that's why I tell people who live in consumers turf that you should be as concerned about this as well as people who live in the territory of DTE.
That's very
Brian.
true.
Brian,
my question's regarding the grandfather clause. I need some clarity there. The grandfather clause you said for the 2024 proposal would say that there no longer is a grandfather clause, but are you saying that until 2024, we still have the 10-year grandfather clause?
Okay, so so are you talking about people who are on net metering, the old rate, or people who are on the distributed generation tariff?
Yeah, I'm talking about the people that are currently signing up. Do they have the availability to lock in for 10 years?
No.
No.
If people signed up now, they would be on the current rate schedule until Q1 2024, and then the LMP would kick in. Now, in terms of, I'm sorry, that's in terms of the outflow rate. In terms of the rate schedule, the proposal is a little unclear. It says they can stay on the rate schedule they're on, but it doesn't say for how long.
That's open for interpretation rather than clear for us to be able to talk to our customers about what they're signing up and how long they can be signed up for.
What's one of the big problems of these cases? They propose these things and the case lasts for 10 months. And in the meantime, nobody knows what is going to happen, right? So you can lose sales because you can't tell your customer what they're going to get paid. Even if the commission says no to all of this, we got 10 months of limbo here.
Yeah, that seems pretty unclear, and it makes it difficult for us in this field selling to be able to have confidence to say if we lock you in now, we're locking you in for 10 years.
The other thing that I want to share with everybody is that currently Governor Whitmer and the staff at the Michigan Department of Environmental, Great Lakes and Energy, they are drafting the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan, which is the plan for Michigan to decarbonize. And they have a goal of reducing carbon emissions by 52% by 2030. And then by 2050, they want to be carbon neutral. In order to achieve those goals, we have to promote renewable energy in Michigan. We have to turn loose the private sector so that they can, so people, individuals can install solar on their homes or businesses or their farms. And what DTE is proposing will go counter to that effort. And so what DTE is doing is so fundamentally wrong and will hurt Governor Whitmer and her efforts to have Michigan do the right thing and reduce carbon emissions.
John, you're right. The studies have been done on both DTE and consumers' proposals going forward, and they're far short of the goals as set up by the governor.
Right. Next question is Ben Brown, I think. Here.
Okay, yep, there we go. So have we as a group or contacts started networking with the Sierra Club or other groups? And please, John, send talking points to us, or at least to me, yeah, so that I can talk to my local legislator.
The short answer, Ben, is that yes, there are a whole slew of organizations that routinely intervene in rate cases, including the Sierra Club and Michigan EIBC and Ecology Center, a whole slew of them. But we also, but that's the
Environmental Law and Policy Center.
Right.
I mean, we work with all those folks regularly on these cases.
But that's the inside game. The other thing I think it's really important we need to do is do what I call the outside game, which is to get people to directly contact the Michigan Public Service Commission. We need people to write letters to the editor and submit op-eds to local newspapers. We need to get the word out to the public about how awful this proposal is, and so that we can build gentle political pressure on the commission to do the right thing. And frankly, if more people email and send letters to the editor, we're actually helping the commission make their decision because we have their back. Fang, you have a question, Fang?
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions and just make it short. So the first question is, I noticed the way they allocate energy delivery cost is mostly based on the customer sectors, the aggregated customer sectors, non-coincident peak load. So which I think it is likely, because I don't have data yet, so I cannot say, but my gut feeling is probably put more cost allocation weight to the residential customers, because for residential customers, most of us, when we use most electricity, off-peak hours, weekends, after work hours, right? But for industrial customers, they probably use more electricity during the weekday and the working hours. Those are hours peak happens. So they use the non-coincident peak. It means add up all our peak electricity usages, which happens at off-peak hours, and then say, okay, you put the weight on us, put the cost allocation on us. So I think it's likely the whole residential customer sector, we pay more delivery cost, which then we should be allocated. So
I
wanted
definitely
to know,
agree,
is
Fang,
this
and you're
something-
totally on to the key point there about coincident peak versus non-coincident peak, and
Yes,
how meaningless it is to make a demand charge based on a residential customer's peak usage when he's probably sharing a transformer with several of his neighbors. All that matters
Yeah.
at all is the aggregated peak of all those people, and they're not considering that.
yeah. So I wanted to know, is this a practice DTE has been using for years? Or it's something new, because it's my first year to look at the rate case with DTE. So this is the question I wanted to know. And yeah, and then my second question is, how do they estimate the average monthly LMP price? Because that price, 24-hour load, is the price every hour, the price different, and the usage is different. Do you just simply take the average of the hourly price, or you weighted it, right? Each hour the usage is different, then the average will be different. And another thing is the solar, our generation is from 7 to like 6 p.m. That at that period, the price is much higher than the hourly price, at night like now. So how do they do this? It's not clear. And yeah, I would like to know, how do we do it before? And then the last portion is about the service level charge, like John mentioned. It's very difficult to understand, and it's very hard to tell right away what's the real impact to you. So I took one of my friends, so she's a solar owner. So I asked her to share her past 12-year hourly usage data with me, and I did calculation. So for her, which means because she has solar, so she also electrified part of her home. So she has heat pump dryers, and induction oven. So those when she, at the weekend do lots of cooking and laundry. So her average maximum peak load is like 11 kilowatt hour. So with that, I calculated her monthly fixed charge would be 180.
Yeah.
And she's a solar owner. So compared to like the current inflow outflow rate, which she's in, the new way will add like about 50 to 100 per month additional, and it depends on the usage, to her bill. That's a fixed charge. And then her outflow rate would be cut in half, like we found out. So that's why I think it's not only not good for solar owners, also very bad for those homes they have electrified or own the process to electrify their home, because when you use induction oven, it will add like 2 kilowatt per hour to your usage, and you have heat pump water heater and heat pump dryers, and most of us, we use it at weekends. We use those all at weekends, so it will boost up our maximum hourly usage. So also I look at another colleague's our past 12 months hourly usage. So if I use the method DTE calculate what's your average, maximum hourly usage for it should be like 10 kilowatt level. So it still belongs to the pricey level. But if I take away all her weekend loads, just take away weekend loads, so not including the weekday off-peak loads, then her past 12 months average monthly average maximum hourly load dropped to 6 kilowatt hour. So because she said, oh, that makes sense because I do laundry at weekends. So that's why, So I think the way they do it is, yeah.
If I could try and answer your first question, you asked if this non-coincident peak type charge was DTE had been doing it for a long time. They have for industrial and commercial customers. It's a brand new idea, well, brand new proposal to impose them on residential customers.
Okay, Great question, Tang. Thank you very much. Tom Gallery.
Yeah, this is more of a comment. I put up at 7:22. I put up a little chat there of a quick study I did today on inflow outflow charges. In other words, the outflow you get paid half retail, and obviously you pay full retail for inflow. Now, John mentioned earlier shared transformers. So if you look at this from the standpoint of DTE, what's going on with these distributed energy proposals, and consumers and DTE both have basically the same thing right now, which is half retail for excess energy, and look at it as a profit center for the utility, because what happens is when a site is producing excess energy, that energy does not go back on the grid because everybody has a shared transformer, or probably 90% of the customers are on shared transformers. That energy goes through the low voltage side of that transformer directly to the neighbor and through the neighbor's meter. Now, DTE pays the solar producer half retail and then immediately charges the neighbor full retail. And actually, the study I did was I have data from a bunch of net zero homes, and I looked at what the annual profit is for DTE or consumers for a home that produces as much solar as the home consumes. And it turns out that it's anywhere between $400 a year and $1,500 a year, which is straight profit for doing nothing to the utility, for the utilities. And that's like $42 to $125 a month. And then if you add on all these fees that they're talking about, these fixed fees, I think I saw a number of $65. You're talking about dramatic increases in the bills for people's solar. You can then scale that up to how much profit does consumers make. I did that study about a year ago. They make between $4 and $5 million a year by reselling low-cost energy to the neighbor. It doesn't even touch their utility lines. It goes through the transformer that the neighbors paid for themselves, and they maintain them. And if you scale that up to DTE, which is much larger, they're probably going to be making somewhere between 10 and 12, maybe $15 million a year, new profit from solar owners with this distributed energy system. To me, it's just legalized theft. And someone mentioned earlier in Florida, I happen to have been in Florida when they were arguing all this. And I wrote a couple articles for the local newspapers and called it legalized theft, because that's what's going to happen in Florida. They have true net metering now, and they want to go to this half retail. And I don't know if everyone knows, but the driver for this is a group called the Edison Electric Institute. If anybody knows who they are, raise your hand. But their history goes all the way back to 1930s, when they tried to stop the REA from bringing electricity to rural areas in the United States. So I think it's more important to just follow the money on this than worry about some of the details of how demand charges and things like that are going to affect it. None of it's going to be good for anybody. I can be sure of that. Thanks.
You're welcome, Tom. Thank you. Now we go to another Tom Regan.
Hey, John. Yeah, I mean, I'm just mad as hell. I just plunked down 20 grand for solar panels, and now they want to charge me $65 a month to use them. I'm just spitting mad. But I think we need to look at some kind of direct action protests directed at DTE as well. We might be able to get some of the, like, Extinction Rebellion and some of the other militant groups involved. But hell, I'd go down there and chain myself to a door and get arrested. I'm just so goddamn mad I can barely think straight.
Okay, sounds good. Let's go, Brian, you've already asked one question. Let's make sure the others have a chance. Let's go to Mindy first, and keep your hand up, Brian. We'll get back to you. Mindy, go ahead.
Thanks, John. I just wanted to know why anyone who's a non-solar user would opt in for these rates. What's the
I
intent of?
Yeah, it's an obvious question, right? I contemplated that. The only thing I can think of, a lot of what makes our usage peaky is air conditioning. I think maybe if you didn't have air conditioning, so that your usage all through the year was pretty steady, maybe you'd come out better. I haven't done the analysis to know. It's just kind of a guess, but I don't think they're going to have a whole lot of people volunteering for that rate.
What do you think, Rob?
It's also very important to note that in the case, they've indicated that they're moving towards this for all customers. So even though they might say you can opt out of it this time, they are definitely on the path of wanting to charge everybody demand charges. And my opinion is that the driver is this coincident, non-coincident peak multiplier. So they set the rate at what the system peak is, 2 in the afternoon on weekdays, and that's what they set it at. But every individual typically has their peak at 7 in the evening when they're all home for dinner. And so if you add up all those individual peaks, it's many times more than what the system peak is. And so it's another way of the utilities garnering more money than is really appropriately received through their rate collection.
And let's not forget that the other thing about these rate cases is that the utilities always ask for a guaranteed rate of return, a guaranteed profit of 10%. So you compare DTE with a typical business that has to work hard to make a profit, and DTE gets it with almost not even asking. It's like Tom said, legalized theft. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is probably really easy, which is what's the schedule for deciding this rate case, and what happens if the Public Service Commission turns it down?
So the schedule, the last thing that the interveners do is October 17th. I would expect a commission decision then in late October, probably more like mid-November or something. So, fourth quarter this year. How's that? I would expect a decision. If they say no, probably well, they've already computed their new proposed rates for D1, and so we'd probably go back to that, right? This inflow outflow with the DG tariff with Rider 18 as we know it, and the D1 or other optional rate schedules.
So you're saying that they would have to submit a new rate case if this one's turned down. There won't be a shorter path to revise it?
No, I don't think so.
No, I think it's that they are it's business as usual. They'll just continue with the new rate of the existing strategies. You'll go forward for another year.
Right. Right. So they need to
call?
submit a new rate case that's different than this one, and the whole clock will start over again. No?
Why don't we have
a new rate
I don't want
case
to put
every-
Julie on the spot, but Julie,
every
can
year
you
anyway.
chime in?
Yeah, if this particular proposal is not approved in the rate case, the commission will have lots of options because of interveners like GLREA, and staff will be filing testimony. We have a rates and tariff section who's looking at this particular proposal. The commission will most likely have other options to choose from. But the one thing that is a little tricky about this is that DTE is proposing not to increase beyond the 1% minimum required program size if they don't get this tariff. And the way the law is written, it's a voluntary thing for the utility to increase the amount of distributed generation that they include in their program.
Sounds great. Thank you, Julie.
That's
So-
a really important point, Julie. Thank you. Right. So DTE has said they'll increase their DG participation cap to 3% if they get both of these things approved. If not, it's still 1%. So what happens then? Well, it's not terribly well defined.
And these utilities, that's a standard tactic now. They dangle out raising the cap in return for getting what they want in terms of the distributive energy tariff. And it's public arm twisting, and it's bad. It's a bad style. They have no honor. John, do you have any more questions, or can we move to Dale?
Yeah. Just a quick remark that means that we ought to be lobbying hard to get the cap removed in legislation, and then they can't do that anymore.
That's true, John. But the problem, though, is that Joe Bellino is from the Monroe area. He's taken $78,000 from the utilities in the last 3 years in campaign contributions, and he's the chair of the committee. So he's sitting on the bills, and he's running for the Senate now, and he's going to want to tap into DTE for campaign dollars. And so that's the problem with the legislator, is that you get the wrong legislator in the right position, they can kill the movement of legislation. But we had a call today with our allies, and we're going to try and put more pressure on Bellino this year to schedule a vote on the bill.
So I was wondering if John could quickly define some of the terms, or point me to a document that does. Words like delivery and power supply and capacity and so on.
I wish I could. So there are allocators. I mean, it's somewhere in the spreadsheets of the rate case, right? Where there are allocators that allocate particular costs on the network into those different buckets, which is then divided by the kilowatt hours being sold to determine the rate. But roughly, power supply is or energy of the power supply is the fuel that goes into the power plants. Capacity is roughly the plants themselves, and then delivery is all the transformers and wires and poles. But that's not exactly right, but it gets you in the ballpark.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left, and we've got 4 more questions we want to get to. So let's move on to Dale.
I had a couple of notes that I wrote down, ideas about arguments against it. You guys probably have a big long list, but in the past, I thought I heard that treating customers like solar or DG customers as its own class. They argued against that, but now this is essentially saying, oh, now these people are special and they need their own class, so we can shaft them so specially. In the past, I think they argued against that. In any case, solar customers are still such a small portion of the grid usage in either direction that it's not a good thing. The other idea that I had was, this is the first rate case where DTE, or maybe even consumers, has said for residential they want to have a demand charge or capacity-based thing. It's not anything unique. Like California, lots of places, Arizona is one. I put in the chat, there's a group of people there on the SRP utility, and they have, I don't know, like maybe 24 available different rate plans, and a lot of them are these demand charge things. And you can either pay a really high rate for your power, or you can have solar panels and batteries, and you can manage your usage so that you don't use a lot during peak times, or you use none, or you send it out and get some credit back during peak times. And then off peak, you're free to use whatever you need. Usually it's going to be some lower rate, or it could be some lower power that you use. But I don't believe there's demand charge on off peak use, because that's the opposite of what the system really should be encouraging. Off peak is when power is not widely used by everybody. They have too much generation. They have all this capacity set up to distribute it, but nobody wants it. That's what renewable energy or DG customers can help. And you shouldn't be penalized for using capacity off peak. So I'd be okay with this plan if it was anything like, for example, some of the plans that are available from this SRP utility in Arizona. My point with that is, this is the first demand-based charge they've come up with. Are solar customers really the ones who are the most intensive users of the grid, like retail customers or even commercial customers? Show me, I would like to see DTE or somebody else show me the worst 1 or 2% of all of the retail customers and how much capacity they use at different times of the day and how that coincides with the peaks versus the DG customers. And what they'll find is the DG customers help the peaks because our outflow on peak is usually when it's sunny. It's still going to depend on whether you're consumers and you consider 2 to 7 p.m. or DTE considering 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. 11 a.m. is kind of early for peak, but there's plenty of outflow. Anyway, they should do some kind of comparison like that. What other good?
Dale, we gotta move.
So anyway, if anybody wants some other ideas, I had some other notes written down. So anyway, thanks.
You're welcome, Dale. Thank you. Great comments. Our next person is Josh. Go ahead, Josh. Josh Mason. Yes, you.
Yeah, thanks, John. The 2 comments. One was the rates would be a lot cheaper with the demand charge, and you can use a battery to trim out your spikes to maintain a low price on there. That's used in commercial applications fairly well. The other thing is Solarc has CTs on some of their arrays, so you don't send any energy back to the utility if you don't want to. So that is an option in the future. I know that's kind of way to the far side of this. Obviously, we want money back for the energy we're making instead of shunting it off and not producing it. But that's also a possibility if somebody doesn't want to make the grid richer. That's all I have.
Thanks,
I think if this came to pass, there'd be all kinds of things people would do to try and adjust to it. Batteries, obviously, going into no export mode or disconnecting from the grid entirely. And, I think it would be great if this happened, if then a bunch of customers said, DTE, go away, right? I've got solar, I've got batteries, I got a generator, I'm done with you. I think that would be a beautiful outcome that might dissuade other utilities from following suit.
Pansella, you're up.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to, this is my second call today about what's going on with DTE Energy. And I'm like, Tom, I'm like ready to, let's take it to the streets real quick. But I do want to say that I'm with I'm the co-chair of the Defend Black Voters Coalition. So we are taking on DTE Energy in these rate cases as well from a different angle. But it's not separate from the already issues that's impacting, especially in communities of color even around the power outages and how they're taking the money and that disrespectful $25 they gave to people and all this kind of stuff. And then their inability to be able to even can afford solar if you choose to have it the way this thing is constructed, right? And so one of the things, our angle around this is, the DTE Energy and others have come out talking about they support Black Lives Matter. They don't support voter suppression, but yet their dollars are going towards their voter suppression agenda. So we're actually going to target legislators from that angle about target corporations from that angle about putting money into voter suppression. So, but we also want to use what DTE Energy has done in the communities of color of being hypocritical in terms of what they're doing. So that's just our twist on this. Because it's also about the voter, it's not a twist, really a reality about voter suppression in Michigan. And then also the disrespect they have shown over the past, especially over the past few years, but particularly last year when all these power outages went out when you look at the grid. So I just wanted to put that out there that we're definitely in the fight around this rate case for a myriad of things, but voter suppression is our angle and holding corporations accountable to supporting legislators that support voter suppression.
Pansella, who are you with again? Tell everybody.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm the director of Moses, and I am the co-chair of a coalition called Defend Black voters.
And what is
And that's-
Moses, Pansella?
Oh, we're a faith-based, thank you, John. We're a faith-based organization in Southeast Michigan. We're also Moses Action, which we're targeted in Saginaw, Kalamazoo, Lansing, and Metro Detroit. And we organize through congregations and Black clubs.
I have worked with Pansella in the past. She's an amazing organizer. So welcome to us.
Thank you, John.
David, you're up.
Thank you. I jumped on to about 8 kilowatts of PV about 20 years ago when solar currents was a thing, the rebates and so on. Now, I thought I had a 20-year contract. And I believe it was, well, I signed a 20-year contract with DTE. I believe it was about 2 years ago when the shift occurred in dropping the net metering outflow rates. Is that true? Okay, so at that point, obviously my bill jumped, my solar benefits plummeted. My question is, did I have or do I have any continuing legal recourse to enforce that original solar currents contract, which did seem to specify rates for supposedly 20 years?
I will leave that to legal counsel. I've heard other people say that. I think there have been some arguments with the Public Service Commission about that, but I don't know of any.
Don, do you have any
lost
thoughts?
That one. I took that officially to the Public Service Commission and lost it. And they'll pay you the 20 years of renewable energy credit payments, but they read it as not ensuring that you were still net metered for 20 years. I mean, I wasn't completely prepared to argue it well. Maybe if somebody wants to argue it again, I'd have some advice and you could try it again. Maybe you have some better, you might have better luck.
I figured it was a lost cause because there was this little tiny loophole in the contract which said something about if there are global changes in the rates, we are subject to them. And I believe that's probably their cop out, but thank you.
Yeah, Julie's nodding her head, so it sounds like about right. So, okay, we're going to do Diane Van Buren, then Marcia Curran's going to have the last one. So Diane, go ahead.
Thank you, John. I was so happy to see Pansella. We just reconnected and chat actually earlier to tell her and tell everyone that here in Detroit, we are working on this case with GLREA. I am a board member, also co-chair of the Renewable Energy Committee for the Green Task Force. On Thursday next week, Diane Cheklich, the co-chair with me, and myself will be presenting at the Green Task Force this case. So thank you. This is very timely. We do need all Detroiters who, half of Detroiters are energy burdened to begin with. So the whole 8.5 cents increase to begin with is insulting. But then making it so that they can't have even an option of going solar makes it doubly hard. So I'm very proud of the work that everything's doing. And yes, we will be, Pansella, joining forces and getting this word out here in Detroit. Thank you.
Marcia, you have the last word.
Thank you. Great discussion. I really appreciate it. Can you do a program on community solar? I should think that would be a real threat to the DTE types. And we need to get that, in the public area so people are thinking about it as an option. I mean,
We should do a program on community solar, Marcia. The problem is the same as the 1%. There are two bills, one sponsored by a Republican, one sponsored by a Democrat. They're in the House Energy Committee, and Joe Bellino is refusing to hold a vote on those bills as well, because the DTE and consumers, they testified against those two bills. So we're in the same boat. Now, what we need to do is we need to elect more legislators on a pro-renewable energy platform. And GLREA is going to be working with our allies to try and use this election cycle to elect more good legislators in both political parties that support renewable energy. So
good. Well, but I mean, Bellino, if he takes that much money from the utilities, it's a conflict of interest. I mean, totally. Why don't we play that up? I mean,
well, one could argue it's a conflict of interest, but there's a counter argument that says that legislators have the right to raise money from whomever. And the utilities play that game very well. And that's why we call them in some of our email messages, we call them big bullies, because they throw their weight around and they can cut large checks to legislators. And we have to hold legislators' feet to the fire. We have to embarrass them. We have to get members to contact legislators to tell them, how we want them to vote in support of renewable energy and not take money from the utilities. So stay tuned for those types of efforts from GLREA in the near future. But it's 8:03, our hour is up, and I want to thank all of you for joining us
Don,
tonight.
can I ask one quick question real quick
Sure.
before we hang up? Is this is a proposal for residents. Is this going to affect our farmers, considering most of their businesses are their residents? Is this proposal going to affect our farmers as well?
The reduction in outflow will affect all solar users, everyone on Rider 18. The demand charge thing says residential. I don't know how they define that on farms.
Julie, do you know by chance?
I dropped a copy of the tariff in the chat. Let's see. It's up at 743. It's called Residential Stable Bill Service. So yeah, I guess I have to say, I don't know what the company is planning to do for commercial. So that's a good question.
Well, an earlier question by John Gourlay is the process. This is a 10-month process by law. It started on January 21st, so we're still in the relatively early stages of this case. So we're going to be working hard over the next 7 months to make our case heard with the Public Service Commission as well as with the public. So stay tuned. And again, I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. I want to make another pitch for those that are not members of GLREA to join us. And I particularly want to encourage all of you to utilize the Take Action on the GLREA website to send an email to the Public Service Commission. And we will be sending out additional information in the future about how you can support this work in fighting this case. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.